Hello, I'm Rascador. The 41st vehicle for fuel efficiency on the way home from work in Gangnam today is the Polestar 2 long-range dual-motor performance package. This vehicle is a performance electric vehicle. Today, from 5 p.m., we will drive 24.7 kilometers on congested roads to test how much fuel economy an electric vehicle can achieve. Today, we will compare this vehicle with the Ioniq 5 2WD, EG80, and EV4WD. This vehicle is equipped with Continental Sport 6, 245, 40, 20-inch rims. And today's temperature is currently around 10 degrees, so I don't think battery usage and fuel economy will be bad. Now, it's 5 o'clock, so let's go. I've never done a gas mileage test on my way home from work with my Volvo. One of the reasons is because of the instrument panel. The current Volvo cars are a little different and show fuel economy right away. However, in the case of older Volvo cars, unlike other cars, it was inconvenient to see the fuel economy because you had to go into the menu and check it. Today, I'm going to show you fuel economy here on the screen below. And at the point of checking the fuel economy in the middle, I would like to talk about this vehicle by comparing the driving time and fuel economy with other comparable vehicles. The model introduced today is the Polestar 2 with the long-range dual-motor performance package applied. In a way, this model is the most expensive model of the Polestar 2. Let's talk about the price of this model, the evolution of the Polestar brand, and the upcoming Polestar. First of all, Polestar 2 official fuel economy is 4.6 kWh, and city fuel economy is about 5.1 kWh. In the case of electric vehicles, today is the fourth fuel economy test, and so far all have obtained good results. This is because electric vehicles are more efficient than internal combustion engines when the roads are congested. Let's see what the results will be compared to the official fuel efficiency figures today. I will go to Guro Digital Complex Station and check the first fuel economy and continue. Arrive at Guro Digital Complex Station. It took about 20 minutes to get here. The fuel consumption is about 26 kilowatt-hours, but I think it will be about 3.5 kilowatt-hours. This vehicle has a difficult fuel economy unit, so I searched to see if I could change it, but I can't set the unit. So far, it can be seen as a fuel economy of 3.5 kWh. The Ioniq 5 achieved a fuel economy of 4.8 kWh to this location. The EG80 was 3.1 kWh, and the EV64WD was 3.84 kWh. Looking at it like this, it's still a little vague to say that the fuel economy of this vehicle is bad. Now let's talk a little bit about Polestar 2's history. Many people still know Polestar as a Chinese brand, but you can see it as a Volvo affiliate. In 1996, there was a company that participated in a high-performance race car competition with a Volvo vehicle. It was a competition called the Swedish Touring Car Championship called STCC. This team was Flash Engineering, and Volvo's technology was pretty good at the time. It was around 1987 that an advertisement came out with the feeling that Volvo's performance was comparable to that of Porsche through a scene where a Volvo wagon and Porsche ran together. So, from the late 80s through the early to mid-90s, Volvo was one of the most powerful companies in Europe. Because Volvo's fundamentals are so solid, Flash Engineering entered the competition with a Volvo vehicle in 1996, and the results were beyond expectations. At that time, it was enough to wipe out all STCCs. There were other companies that showed similarities to their relationships. That was Mini and John Cooper Works. It can be said that the relationship between Mini and JCW, Volvo and Polestar started like this. And if there is one more company, it's Benz and AMG. So Volvo's Polestar seems to have originally had a strong image of high performance. In 2018, the S60T8 Polestar model equipped with an internal combustion engine was sold in Korea. Then many people thought, should I pay this price to buy a Volvo? So it didn't sell much. At the time, the S60T8 model was a vehicle that produced 415 horsepower with 2.0 gasoline, so it can be seen that it started as a very high-performance brand. Polestar launched a new electric vehicle brand in 2021. Polestar 2 introduced today is a pure electric vehicle model, but Polestar 1 is a plug-in hybrid. So, it was a vehicle that combined a high-performance internal combustion engine and an electric car, but was released in 2019 and discontinued in 2021. As Polestar 1 was discontinued, all factories that made this model started making Polestar 2, and only Polestar 2 was steadily made for 2 years until this year. It is significant in that Polestar has developed into a brand exclusively for road electric vehicles. Hyundai Genesis is a company that makes both internal combustion engines and electric vehicles. It has a strong image as a luxury brand. Conversely, the brands BMW and BMW i, Mercedes and Mercedes EQ. If these brands feel like a part of the brand is divided into electric vehicles, Polestar feels completely separate. Therefore, Volvo and Polestar are operated by completely different companies in Korea and have different representatives. If Chevrolet, Cadillac, and GMC are under the CEO of GM Korea like GM, Polestar and Volvo are completely different brands. However, Polestar 2 has a lot of Volvo technology, so it feels like making Volvo cars in Polestar style so far. However, the upcoming Polestar 3, 4, 5, and 6 will be released sequentially as vehicles unrelated to Volvo. Perhaps invisible parts or parts like buttons will be shared with Volvo to lower the price. They will try to make the car price as low as possible by lowering the manufacturing cost and electronic parts as much as possible. Anyway, it seems that Polestar will be completely different in terms of design and setting in the future. And there are many saying that Polestar and Volvo are Chinese companies. Speaking of Polestar today, it is true as far as I know that Chinese Geely owns 51% of Polestar, but the other half is still owned by Volvo. And Polestar's headquarters are still in Sweden. For manufacturing plants, there are models made in China and other overseas plants. In fact, the BMW X3 is only made in China. Cases like the X3 are only made in China, and this case is fine, but it's a little ironic to say anything only to Volvo. So, there are some people who distrust that it is made in China, but it has the advantage of being able to make it at a slightly cheaper price. The price part of this vehicle and the reason why it is good for the cost will be told later. In any case, this vehicle belongs to the Geely, but you can see that it is a high-performance vehicle with a lot of technology from Polestar and Volvo. And in particular, I think that this performance package is more than the performance of high-performance electric vehicles that other companies have not felt before. Polestar 2 seems to be a model that tries to show what a good electric car is through this brand. Now I have arrived at Seoul station. Gas mileage so far has been 23.4 kilowatts. If you do the math, you get about 4.2 kilometers kilowatt. The fuel efficiency is better than expected, and the number is increasing. In fact, other electric cars also showed a similar figure that was better than the official fuel economy by the time they passed Gangnam Station. So, I wonder how much fuel economy will come out today. The vehicle we are testing today is a vehicle equipped with a performance package on a 4-wheel dual motor, not a 2-wheel drive. Today, we will compare the fuel economy of this vehicle with the Ioniq 2WD and EV6 4WD. In fact, this vehicle should be compared with the EV6 GT, but we decided to compare it like this to know the results of dual motor versus dual motor and dual motor versus single motor. And the EG80 model is the 4th electric car test today, so I just put it on the list. Now, let's go near Seoul National University Station and talk a little more. I arrived at Seoul National University Station. It took about 36 minutes. Originally, it was 8 kilometers to go a little further, but it is said that he drove 8.1 kilometers to this point. I don't know if this is a wheel size issue, but this vehicle appears to be going a little further. Fuel economy has been around 4.3 kilometers kilowatt so far. Under the same conditions, the Ioniq 5 showed fuel efficiency of 5.7 kilometers kilowatt, the EG80 3.9 kilometers kilowatt, and the EV6 4WD 5.3 kilometers kilowatt. In fact, in the case of the EV6 4-wheel drive model, the front wheel is generally used a little while driving. However, I remember that there was actually no big difference in fuel economy on congested roads because most of them use only one motor when going slowly. I don't know exactly how the single motor and dual motor work in this vehicle, but I know that the fuel economy is about this. Polestar 2 is a model that starts electric vehicles in earnest from this brand. So, as I said earlier, Polestar 1 came out as a plug-in hybrid model, and from Model 2, it will continue to come out only as an electric vehicle. So, Polestar 3, 4, 5, and 6 are planned in the future, and in the case of Polestar 5, a concept car called Precept was introduced. First of all, this vehicle is scheduled to be released in earnest in 2020 and is a model that directly competes with the Model 3. Volvo made a concept car called the 40.2, and this car was built almost exactly like this concept car. The Polestar 5 Precept concept car was also unveiled a while ago, and the upcoming Polestar 5 is expected to come out almost the same. It is expected that it will be made the same as the concept car as it is reminiscent of a semi-large sedan beyond a supercar. To be precise, it is a 4-door sports semi-large sedan, and it can be seen as a 4-door high-performance electric vehicle model to be released for models such as the current Taycan or e-tron GT. In the case of the Polestar 2 single motor, the maximum output is 231 horsepower and the torque is 33.7 kg/m. In addition, 0 to 100 km comes out in 7.4 seconds and is a vehicle that can travel 417 km on a single charge. The dual motors have an output of 408 horsepower and a maximum torque of 67.3 kg/m. And 0 to 100 km comes out in 4.7 seconds, and you can think of it as a high-performance electric vehicle that travels 344 km on a single charge. Are there any other cars with 400 horsepower? Looking for it, it seems to be about the Porsche Boxster GTS 4.0. Of course, there are many vehicles with lower displacement and 400 horsepower. For example, in the case of the older Polestar internal combustion engine, the 2.0 model pulled out more than 400 horsepower. Anyway, this car seems to have that much horsepower. And 0 to 100 km said it was about 4.7 seconds, but in comparison, AMG GT is 5 seconds and 0 to 100 km is 380 horsepower. Although it cannot be compared with an internal combustion engine, it shows performance similar to that of a vehicle worth 100 million won or more. The price starts at 54.9 million won for a long-range single. A dual motor with 408 horsepower is 59.9 million won. Looking at the price, options in the form of packages came out rather than details. Therefore, the Pilot Lite costs 2.99 million won and the Plus Pack costs 5.4 million won. And the price range of the Performance Pack introduced today is in the 6.5 million won range. Many people think that performance packs are too expensive. To be honest, I've never seen so many performance packs on the road. This is because when a performance package is applied to the dual motor, a car worth about 65 million won is burdensome. However, if I buy a Polestar 2, I will definitely apply the performance package. One of the reasons is that this package is very cost-effective. First off, which suspension company do you think is the best? Those of you who are a bit older and have done some tuning will probably think of Bilstein. And if you are in your late 30s, there will be people talking about KW. Of course, some people think of Öhlins first. If I have to put it that way, I think the best performing suspension in the world is the Öhlins. Öhlins is one of the very famous brands not only in cars but also in motorcycles. Let's talk a little bit about why. Just like car racing, F1, motorcycles also have a racing event called MotoGP. In F1, a dedicated vehicle called a machine is used, but in MotoGP, it is made into a mass-produced vehicle. At this time, it runs up to a speed of 320 to 340 km/h in the game, and the suspension used here is almost the Öhlins suspension. It is a suspension that can be controlled to a very fine level, and this company is a Swedish company. Polestar and Volvo also represent Sweden, but Öhlins represents the suspension field. The Öhlins company and Polestar have teamed up. This Öhlins suspension is of the DFV type. I know that this vehicle is also a DFV type. This is called a dual flow valve and serves to change the damping force according to the road surface. So, when I looked for how much this was in the aftermarket and applied it to the Mini JCW, it was about 4.2 million won. And considering many other things, it seems to be about 500 to 600 won. Therefore, the performance package of 6.5 million won can be seen as almost a suspension cost. Not only that, Brembo applies here. It is marked Polestar Brembo in yellow. Brembo is a brake company we know well. Even F1 machines use Brembo heavily. Probably, in my memory, 3 to 4 companies such as Brembo and Alcon are mainly used, and most teams seem to use Brembo brakes a lot. If you install Brembo brakes of this size in the aftermarket, you will have to pay about 5 to 6 million won. Then, about 10 million won has already been formed for the suspension and brakes, and it's expensive to replace these yellow seat belts in the aftermarket with the original package set. I cut the belt from end to end and assembled it, but when I made an estimate, it was about 500,000 won. As far as I know, in the case of Porsche, each vehicle is slightly different, but to put this option, I know that it is between 500,000 won and 1 million won. And in the case of Polestar 2, 18 inches and 19 inches are usually applied, but this model applies 20-inch wheel tires. The reason is really nothing. Probably because the brakes can't be put in there. So gas mileage can definitely feel a drop-off at 20 inches, but that's why the Brembo comes with 20-inch wheels. However, if these wheels are purchased separately from the aftermarket and installed, it is expected to cost about 1 million won per wheel and 4 million won in total. Let's assume it's around 3.5 million won. Then, the parts calculated above will total about 14 million won. And performance summer tires are applied here. I know that it is probably applied as a winter tire in Sweden. If you buy wheels and tires together in the aftermarket like this, it will be about 6 million won. So let's roughly calculate the wheels and tires at 2 million won. Then, if you roughly calculate, you will get a tuning fee of about 14 million to 16 million won. So if you don't need any tuning and want to use it only for driving because your Polestar is pretty, I'd recommend buying a long-range single motor. On the other hand, those who are car savvy, love to drive, and tune savvy will be disappointed if the performance package isn't included. There are many people who change the wheels and change the suspension like Tesla. It costs around 5,000 won to do this, but in that case, I think you'd be better off putting in Öhlins. Those who know the car well may be concerned that the ride comfort will not be good, but the ride I feel now is much better than I thought. I rode a lot of regular Polestar 2s. This is the first time I've ridden this performance model, and the suspension is not that stiff and feels very comfortable. Today, there is less traffic than I thought, so I am already passing near Bangbei station. I'll do a fuel economy check. The current fuel consumption was about 5 km/kW, and the travel time was about 49 minutes. The fuel economy of the Ioniq 5, which took 42 minutes, was 6.3 km/kW, and EG80 time required 51 minutes, fuel consumption 4.4 km/kW, and the EV6 all-wheel drive took 50 minutes and had a fuel economy of 5.9 km/kW. First of all, this vehicle has very good fuel economy, so even if you charge it more often than driving, it is an electric car, but it has the advantage of being equipped with Brembo, Öhlins, and 20-inch high-performance tires. As for the tires, the really high-performance Sport Contact 6 is applied. Usually, vehicles such as the EV6 use fuel efficiency tires exclusively for electric vehicles, but this vehicle does not seem to pay much attention to fuel economy. So in fact, this test doesn't mean much to this vehicle. However, I like this vehicle in the Polestar brand, and I am reviewing it today to accumulate data for comparison when other models of Polestar come out later. Polestar 3 will be released this year in 2023. In the case of this vehicle, it is an electric vehicle model targeting the semi-large SUV market and is expected to compete with the BMW X Series, Audi e-tron, Mercedes EQE model, and Volvo EQ90 model. Looking at the vehicle size, the overall length is about 20 to 30 mm smaller than that of the Porsche Cayenne, so you can see that it is similar. In the case of the overall width, the size is wider than that of the Porsche Cayenne. So, you might ask, wouldn't it overlap with the Volvo EX90? However, the Volvo EX90 comes as a 7-seater model, and the Polestar 3 comes as a 5-seater model. And it is said that it has been certified for a driving distance of about 610 km based on WLTP. It is expected to be expensive as a dual motor is applied as standard to 489 horsepower. It will probably compete with the EV9 or Ioniq 7 as soon as it's released, but I don't know how it will go yet, but I'm looking forward to it. This is because the more you ride the Polestar brand, the more you can expect. In fact, Polestar is more fun to ride even without self-driving like Tesla or launch control or drift mode like EV6. It's a car that makes you want to keep driving it without getting tired of it. So the Polestar 3 made by this brand is expected. In particular, from Polestar 3, many ADAS functions are included. So active air suspension goes in. It is expected that this device will be mounted on an electric car and the ride comfort will be really good. And 5 lidar sensors, 5 external cameras, and 12 ultrasonic sensors were applied. NVIDIA also applies. Those who like games will know it well. It is said that it is a vehicle that took care of autonomous driving in collaboration with NVIDIA. So adding the pilot pack here adds 3 cameras and 4 ultrasonic sensors to NVIDIA's extra controls. I think a car like this would be an amazing model that makes you think you've built an accident-free car. Currently, this is Seoul station. If you go a little further, you will come to Yeoksum station and keep going straight to Jamsil, the last stop. Let's check the fuel economy once more near Yeoksum station and continue the story. Arrived at Yeoksum station. It took 1 hour and 4 minutes and covered about 18.5 kilometers. Fuel consumption is about 4.8 kWh. The Ioniq 5 two-wheel drive single-motor model took 1 hour 1 minute and showed a fuel economy of 6.3 km/kWh. The EG80 took 1 hour and 8 minutes and the fuel consumption was 4.4 km/kWh. And the EV6 dual motor took 1 hour and 9 minutes and fuel consumption was 5.6 km/kWh. It's a little vague to compare the fuel efficiency of this vehicle and these models, but I hope you enjoy it because there are very few electric cars I've ridden for this fuel economy test. In fact, in the fuel economy test on the way home from work in Gangnam, hybrid electric vehicles have an advantage over internal combustion engines. However, some general models achieve only half of the combined city fuel economy. Sometimes it's an interesting test to see results like that, but today, just for fun, say electric cars are a little different. As mentioned earlier, Polestar 1 is a plug-in hybrid, and Polestar 2 is a 100% electric vehicle model. And Polestar 3 will be released as a semi-large SUV model. In this case, the exact specifications of Polestar 4 have not yet been released, but it is expected that a model midway between Tucson and Sorrento will come out. And my prediction is that the Polestar 5 will come out similar to the Precept concept car. The Polestar 5 model is a 4-door. However, Polestar 6 is expected to come out as a 2-door open car based on Polestar 5, but it has not yet been confirmed. That's Polestar's plan to launch the vehicle in the next 2 to 3 years. So I don't think the brand's goal is simply to sell a lot of cars. So I think the brand's goal is to stand out in this market, not just sell a lot of cars. We are at the point where we are going back from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, but we may go back to internal combustion engines from electric vehicles. Looking back on the past, diesel sedans from European cars such as BMW and Audi were popular because diesel was eco-friendly. But now, the trend changes in an instant, saying that diesel is not environmentally friendly. And while electric models continue to claim to be greener, Toyota is a bit behind on electric vehicles. The brand seems to have recently posted a report on whether electric vehicles are eco-friendly. Perhaps it's because hybrids are number one in this brand, while electric cars are lagging behind. In fact, I don't know when the flow will change to the internal combustion engine again, but since electric cars have been made this far, I think it will be maintained for the time being. So, it seems that Polestar will continue to maintain its brand as an electric vehicle unless there are legal regulations. It is a company that makes you feel that it is a brand that has done its best to go steady with electric vehicles. The story I want to share with this vehicle today is a story about what a high-performance electric car and a good electric car are. A good electric vehicle can have several criteria. For example, if I like sedans, there will be personal needs, such as preferring wider seats or prioritizing semi-autonomous driving. In the case of an internal combustion engine, there are various criteria, such as whether it is aimed at high speed, whether it is well balanced and made at a reasonable price. Then, what are the criteria for a high-performance electric vehicle? Should electric cars go from 0 to 100 kilometers in 2 seconds like Tesla? It's high performance, but does it make sense to go that fast with an electric car? This is because there are not many proper electric car races. The world-famous electric car races are ETCR and Formula E, but Tesla rarely participates in them, so what good is a car this fast? And in fact, being fast at 0 to 100 kilometers is simply about speed, but the engine sound and exhaust sound of a vehicle stimulate people's emotions and arouse the desire to buy a car. That's why companies like Akrapovic, famous for their exhaust systems, are getting bigger and bigger. Of course, the company's growth rate is not high due to the introduction of electric vehicles, but it is maintained. Anyway, the high performance of electric vehicles is a part that all companies are concerned about. Personally, I think the company that makes the best car is Porsche. However, even in the case of Porsche, when you ride the Taycan, you hear the sound of a spaceship, but honestly, you feel a sense of heterogeneity. The car, of course, is very nice compared to other electric cars, but compared to the Porsche internal combustion engine, I just want to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle. So, in fact, right now, there's no great alternative to a good electric car, a high-performance electric car. Now, there is a story that it is said that it is an electric car, so it moves the car with electricity and makes the exhaust sound or engine sound arbitrarily like an internal combustion engine, but Hyundai Motor Company will probably do that. And electric cars don't have a single gear. Porsche Taycan, of course, has a 2-speed gearbox. However, I know that some brands are trying to put manual transmissions in electric cars. Companies should try to solve this problem that way. However, in my opinion, in the case of Hyundai Motor Company, it may try to stimulate the emotional part of the internal combustion engine as much as possible by adding engine sound or making the steering wheel a D-kit style rather than convenience and wrapping it in Alcantara. A similar company is Polestar. Speaking of an electric car, I thought it would be nice to have a variable system in the suspension part that adjusts the force reduction within thousandths or 10,000ths of this time by electronic control, also called active suspension. However, Polestar rather uses a brand called Öhlins for its performance package. This gives the impression of emphasizing high performance. And if aftermarket tuning was done by consumers in the past, I think it's surprising that manufacturers of electric vehicle companies are now also involved in aftermarket tuning. First of all, Öhlins is a great company, as mentioned earlier, and the actual price is very expensive. As far as I can remember, Lamborghini was the only production brand to use Öhlins suspension. If you purchase and install only the Öhlins suspension separately, it will cost about 15 to 20 million won or more. However, the second brand to use Öhlins in their mass-produced vehicles is Polestar. And in the case of brakes, American-made Brembo brakes were installed. In the case of Brembo, it is widely used in the aftermarket. In the past, in the case of Genesis and Coupe, there were cases where products produced by Mondo were used instead of imported directly from Brembo, so they were nicknamed Manrembo. Anyway, Brembo is one of the brakes that many companies use a lot. However, this is a large 4P almost 6P in size. That is, it has 4 pistons. It means that the round disc is pressed by 4 pistons. Usually, compact cars have one piston, but with 4 pistons, you can see that the holding power is better. In the case of Brembo, even in the CTSV vehicle with about 658 horsepower, the manufacturer shows Brembo applied as a 6P brake by default. Not only that, but for a while it was fashionable to change the color of the belt to look like a Porsche. But now, the yellow belt, a symbol of performance options, is also applied to this vehicle. The vehicle also had the suspension brakes painted yellow. And as I said earlier, this model seems to have been changed to 20-inch wheel tires due to brake mounting problems. And in the case of Korea, they say that they are equipped with high-performance summer tires, but I don't know what will happen when they are released in winter. Since Sweden is a snowy country, I understand that choosing this option will equip you with high-performance winter tires. So overall, it's a car that feels like a lot of care has been taken. Information on models other than the Polestar 3 has not yet been announced. However, information about Polestar 3 came out roughly, and it is said that this model also has a performance pack. So, if you put the performance pack in, even with the same dual motor, 0 to 100 km is a little faster, so Polestar 3 seems to come out in 0 to 100 km in 4 to 5 seconds even if it is a semi-large size. In this way, I think Polestar is a brand that suggests the direction electric vehicles should go. Another reason to look forward to Polestar is that it is a very open company. In my opinion, the Volvo brand itself was a very closed brand. However, the reason Polestar feels open is because they collaborate a lot. First, Polestar recently submitted a report on the climate crisis response route with Rivian, a brand that makes electric trucks in the United States. It's like appealing to the reason to keep making electric cars. And I think it indirectly showed that Polestar can work hand in hand with Rivian. Another collaboration was the unveiling of an electric scooter with Cake, a bicycle manufacturer. Polestar also seems to have contacted and cooperated with most companies related to electricity in Sweden. For example, Polestar has teamed up with a Swedish electric boat company to use the motors and batteries used in Polestar in electric boats. For reference, Polestar batteries use LG Energy Solution batteries. You can think that Polestar didn't sell a lot because you don't see it on the road. However, in Korea, 2,794 units were sold in 2022. And this vehicle is said to be the most sold as a single electric vehicle model registered with the Korea Imported Vehicles Automobile Association. Therefore, it currently sells about 2,800 units of each Polestar 2 model, and is expected to show a very high growth rate.